what you have to understand about the Jesuits is Ignatius of Loyola was a Marrano Jew, okay? And it's not generally known, and when somebody is Jewish and they conceal their Judaism, they typically call that, the term used is a crypto-Jew. And so what they do is they try to conceal their Judaism, all right, so as to, so that people don't understand who their masters are, what their real strategy, what their real purpose. They're part of a conspiracy against God and man. And so the Jesuits are a crypto-Jewish organization, and they basically control the Roman Catholic Church. And in fact, the present Pope, it happens to be a Jesuit. And the Jesuits are answerable to the Pope and the Jesuit General.
This is not also an accident. It's not an accident, the COVID-19. It's a confirmation of our mission to collaborate, to contribute in the change of this world. We need really to get together so we can go in another way. Something has to change. So don't forget this crisis. Not just, okay, that was a bad night, a nightmare. No, and we are awake again, and we are again in our life as before. No, we have to take the lesson that if we don't change after this, the next one will be worse. If we don't change after this, the next one will be worse.
If we don't change after this,
the next one will be worse.
I continue to call for the world to come together in solidarity and national unity to confront this pandemic, but also to prevent the next one, but also to prevent the next one, but also
to prevent the next one.
If we don't change after this,
the next one will be worse.
So what is driving the riots we've seen over the past several days? The same thing that occurred in our country in the 1960s and early 1970s. They were planned and just needed a spark to get them going. If these were not spontaneous, what was it that drove the people into the streets to riot, loot, and burn down businesses? To answer this question, we ask that you view a video of a movie that was produced in the mid-1960s called Anarchy, USA, that documented what was going on at that time. In those years, it was obviously coordinated mayhem and violence. But other than the John Birch Society, nobody was exposing it, particularly the media. That is until we spread the information far and wide enough for many to no longer ignore just what and who were behind the riots. Such activities are planned, awaiting a reason to get people into the streets and then manipulate them into violence.
The setup.
They put them there on purpose,
Y'all know
bro.
where we at.
They gonna set them hoes right up on the route of
Y'all know what building this is right here. I ain't even gonna say what name it is.
Just some random ass bricks in here.
Look, there's another pile of these random ass bricks. That's what they did in Atlanta.
Random as bricks left in separate cities all over the United States, everywhere, so that the protesters would have something to throw. This is all complete and utter bullshit, and it's still going on. These aren't Antifa people, American. These are cops. This dude right here is probably a military, a CIA handler, operator. He's walking around and telling all these disgruntled people, hey, you should be throwing that picnic table. You should be picking up those bricks. Shouldn't you be over there smashing that glass, etc.? We've seen this throughout the entire thing. You know what I mean? They've been caught dressed as Antifa numerous times. And the reason I'm showing this is because it still goes on, and the shootings continue to go on. It's just absolutely crazy, so don't fall for the hype.
Making it appear as if it is a revolution. We have documented the fact that the pandemic shutdown across America was well planned in advance. We were the first to point this out to the people, and still the mass media ignores the story, even though more and more people have taken up the cause.
The degree of communist influence in these riots has been subject of much discussion and controversy. For a solution to this controversy, let's review the events of recent years, both at home and abroad, in light of the communists' own plans for world conquest.
The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can only be attained by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. The most powerful enemy can be conquered only by exerting the utmost effort and by thoroughly, carefully, attentively, and skillfully taking advantage of even the smallest rift, of every antagonism of interest among the various groups or types within the various countries.
Divide the people. Split them into quarreling factions, fighting among themselves rather than their common enemy. This is the comrades' first rule for the conquest of any country. For well do they know from long experience that the nation so divided and weakened can be easily conquered from within.
So what we're confronted with now is a situation in which the Jewish revolutionary spirit is working both sides of the fence here. We got the Israelicization of the police force through the ADL and the Israelis, and you got the weaponization of black people through Black Lives Matters and George Soros. And that's the issue. That's the issue that we're facing with here, and nobody's allowed to say it. Because there's a word that I said you're not allowed to say in this conversation. But we, I'm saying all of us here, have the freedom to discuss these issues as citizens of South Bend, Indiana.
On the World Economic Forum website, which features the post, "Now is the time for a great reset." This written by Klaus Schwab, executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and of course a Bilderberger who was even on their steering committee at one point. He writes, quote, "We need a great reset of capitalism." The Great Reset agenda would have three main components. The first would steer the market toward fairer outcomes. Depending on the country, these may include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. The second component of a Great Reset agenda would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability, rather than using US, EU, Asia funds, as well as investments from private entities and pension funds to fill cracks in the old system, which they do and will continue to do anyway. We should use them to create a new one that is more resilient, equitable, and sustainable in the long run. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance metrics. And they can improve those by, of course, lying about it and rigging up the numbers, as we reported many years ago about Volvo and the great, of course, emissions scandal. The third and final priority of the Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which just so happens to be the name of this guy's book. And that's going to support the public good. During the COVID-19 crisis, companies, universities, and others have joined forces to develop diagnostics, therapeutics, and possible vaccines, establishing testing centers, create mechanisms for tracing infections, and deliver telemedicine. Imagine what could be possible if similar concerted efforts were made in every sector. End quote.
When you boil it down, there are 9 basic tenets of Agenda 21. Move citizens off private land and into urban housing. Create vast wilderness spaces inhabited by large carnivores. Eliminate cars and create walkable cities. Support chosen private businesses with public funds for sustainable development. Make policy decisions that favor the greater good over individuals. Drastically reduce the use of power, water, and anything else that creates carbon pollution. Use bureaucracies to make sweeping decisions outside of democratic processes. Increase taxes, fees, and regulations. And finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.